Welcome. I am the Moonshine King. This is my Batman Year 1 comic review part 2. That is part 2 in the video series and part 2 of the comic arc. Make sure you watch my part 1 video first, which will be in the card above. And if you are new here, remember to jump on that subscribe button if you would like to eat the cheese. Wouldn't you? Now, part 1 ended with Bruce Wayne bleeding very terribly after a not-so-merry walk around Gotham City streets, where he got stabbed in the leg and had a fight with Selina Kyle and got arrested, but he escaped back to his mansion, where he was desperate for his moment of enlightenment. And that eureka moment came when a bat flew through the window, and his metaphorical light bulb flashed above him, and he knew he would become a bat because he is trans. Chapter 2 is called War is Declared. And we see this very nice image of Bruce standing half hidden in shadow, looking down at his cape which he holds in both hands. He's also wearing his boots and the rest of his costume, but his mask, his cowl, they are nowhere to be seen. The caption, or the hook for this chapter is, he has resigned and planned and waited 18 years. He thinks he's ready. ... So, we will see Batman in action, shall we? And judging by this tease, he thinks he is ready. This suggests that things might not go as certain as he might have hoped. A little bit of tension for you. We are now in April the 4th, so 3 weeks after we left off. 3 weeks after Bruce decides to become a bat. Gordon gets a call about a hostage situation. A gunman holding 3 children at gunpoint, apparently. I say apparently because we only actually see one child. So either the police gave Gordon incorrect information, or the writer of the comic gave the artist incorrect information, or the artist just chose to ignore the writing, because I don't see 3 children here. But Gordon goes in unarmed and saves the children from the paranoid schizophrenic man who was freed only 2 weeks ago from Arkham Asylum. A bit of advice: never free anybody from Arkham Asylum unless you're at least, let's say, 100% sure they're not just going to have an immediate desire to kill someone when they get out. Anyway, I think the whole point of this sequence was to show a few things. Firstly, that Barbara is very loyal and caring towards Gordon. As it's mentioned, she always wakes up to give him coffee, and it must be difficult for her having a husband who is an officer in the worst city on the planet. We see her watching events on the television. But also it must be difficult for Gordon. He is thinking about Barbara, hoping she isn't seeing what's going on, but knows she will be watching while he puts his life in danger. We see him holding a world's greatest dad coffee mug, and we see Barbara wearing a t-shirt that says baby on it with an arrow, so we know he's under pressure. We know he has an important burden on the way, somebody else to think about. Also, there is like this SWAT team, basically, who Gordon was very concerned about, known to be very violent and messy about things. Gordon calls them a lunatic Gestapo, led by this guy called Brandon. So that's why Gordon rushed over there to make sure they didn't end up hurting the children in the rescue. But also the sequence showed us that although Gordon is portrayed as brave and a hero, he is actually also very scared. His knees wobble. He doesn't have the nerve to wipe his nose as he goes up the stairs, and his stomach is described as cold. And he sympathizes with the fact that the kids must be scared out of their wits. Right, like I wasn't, says he. So actually, a lot is given to us in those 3 pages. A lot of character development, you might say. April the 5th, the next day, and now this Brandon is complaining about Gordon to the commissioner, saying he got humiliated in front of his men. Now the commissioner sympathizes, but says they must be patient as Gordon had the press on his side. Meanwhile, Gordon, still contemplating how he hates his job and he hates his gun, which he is practicing to shoot with, imagining the devastating consequence the damage would inflict upon a man. So he is very reluctant to shoot people, clearly very moral to me. Come to April the 6th, we see a big baby bump, reminding us of the baby, and the caption, strong boy, little James. Now I would say, and here's the reveal, except of course, Gordon doesn't actually know that it will be a boy still, as far as I'm aware. He is just calling the baby James still, because that's what he's wishing for, a boy. I'm assuming, therefore, girls have a hard time in Gotham compared to boys, but I can't be certain that's the reason. I mean, he might just hate girls or something, who knows. It's not explicitly explained, I must tell you. But regardless, he still has a misery about it, questioning how he allowed himself to screw up so badly by bringing an innocent child into Gotham, a city without hope. I mean, like I said in my part 1, was there really no jobs going in his old town, or any other town in fact, just anywhere but Gotham basically, maybe live abroad even. And here I think is the same night we see our first shot of the Batman within the story itself. Well, a silhouette of the Batman running along the top of this building. Not sure why he's sort of perched right at the edge there. Did he jump across from that building across where the washing line is hanging? And he looks like he's running forward. Well, there's nowhere to go forward unless he jumps off. But still, it's a nice shot for you. Judging by his wings though, how high up they are, you'd think that he did just jump off from a taller building behind him. But there isn't really one behind him, unless he came from the side. But I think this is too much analysis to you. April the 9th. We get our first Superman Easter egg. Gordon's getting his back massaged by his wife, who suddenly doesn't look very pregnant anymore. I mean, what happened? She went from that hippo to this in a matter of 3 days. Either she's not as fat as it seems in this picture, or she's wearing a very tight corset and crushing the baby's head. Anyway, the Superman reference. Barbara says that you don't have to go to Metropolis for a Man of Steel, implying because you could use a jackhammer to Gordon's back, implying he must be very tense indeed. Very stressful job to you. Then he gets a call about a giant bat. Of course, this sequence also tells us that Jim Gordon can never relax, and his work is always getting in between his family life. Then we get to see the Batman on his first job, so to speak. Well, I'm not certain if it is his first, but it very well might be. But he clearly likes the idea of his silly costume, because the bad guys just stop and stare and give him all the time in the world, as he describes it. And yet, despite having all the time in the world, he still messes up big time. First of all, why is this fancy dress costume so scary? I mean, that's pretty much what it looks like. He even calls it a costume himself. I mean, it doesn't exactly seem to be a high-tech combat fighting machine. And neither is he, apparently. Look at this hack job he pulls off. Basically, he jumps down with a growl he brought from Africa. So I'm assuming that's not just an expression and he has actually been to Africa. So maybe he was trained by the Zulus. Might as well be the case, as we're never told actually in this comic. Which is one of my disappointments, that we never see his actual training in this origin story. But I'm guessing this growl he mentions is just an intimidation technique to throw the opponent off balance or something like that. Well, it certainly worked if that is the case. The kid gets so scared that he leaps backwards off the railing, and so Batman has to hold on to his foot so he doesn't fall. By the way, if he's such a growling guru, why didn't he become Lion Man? Do bats growl? I wonder. He's not exactly staying in character, is he? Is this Batman with a hint of a lion? Hint of bear? Another thing about this scene. It looks like these kids were stealing some stuff from inside this building. I'm not sure if it's an apartment or what, but there's a ladder on the side for some reason. Surely there was a better way of handling the situation rather than just jumping in the middle of them all. Maybe the fact that they had been caught and this big bat guy staring down at them would have been enough to make them put the stuff back, or at least just bail, just run off and forget about it. Try giving them a good telling off to start with at least. Throw in an African growl or two. You never know, it might have done the trick, and we could have avoided the situation altogether. Also, the placement of the ladder doesn't seem exactly consistent in these panels. In the first panel, the ladder seems just next to the right rail bar, which matched the second panel, where the boy is holding onto it with like a 90-degree angle of his arm. But in the next panel, it's nowhere near from this perspective. Now it's nowhere near the left rail, what it looks like. Look at this distance, and the boy is holding onto it in what seems a more outstretched manner of his arm. And in the last panel, you can't even see the ladder anymore. Anyway, we get insight into Batman's moral compass, because he goes to save the boy, saying to himself that he's no killer. But despite him holding on to the kid's life by just his ankle, the other boys decide to take shots at him. And of course the boy is trained, because everyone in Gotham is trained apparently in something to do with combat. So he gets kicked in the back and in the face, and has a television set whacked in the back of his head while he's just slouched over this rail. But he manages, of course, to stand them off, causing a few broken ribs to one of them. So I guess he has no problems there with broken ribs. But he saves the kid who was dangling over, and he calls himself a lucky amateur for beating these 3 kids. This segment reminded me of Batman, the animated series, because although everyone seems to love that series, and it got high ratings and everything, high praise, Batman was actually pretty useless half the time when it came to combat. He would always, I noticed, get undermined, kicked and punched and whatever by people who don't seem to have any sort of training whatsoever, just regular thugs, or people like the Joker or the Riddler or the Clock King. Any old villain could get a shot in at Batman. Everyone gave him a good thumping to this guy who was supposedly an expertly trained martial artist.
Don't count on it, Batman. When it comes to clocks, I am king. On guard!
Playing by my rules.
A very clumsy one, I must say. Yet, getting duped by the most obvious attacks, which I find quite funny from that series, and almost, or maybe a little, frustrating also. Anyway, May the 15th, over a month later, the police are having a meeting about this new Bat vigilante. On the wall we see what looks like playing cards, but must be police drawings, based off descriptions of witnesses. How can their accounts vary so wildly anyway? Unless there's some outright liars giving them information, I don't see how anyone can mistake Batman for this drawing A. Possible some people exaggerated the story to make them feel less silly about themselves. He looks like the Man-Bat in this drawing, who, if you don't know, in the Batman comics and the animated series, as well, was this doctor who made some formula which transforms him into this creature, basically a giant bat. A literal one. I think this might well have been intentional. Drawing C looks like a bit like Batman Beyond, and drawing B looks like Martian Manhunter. 78 acts in 5 weeks, Gordon says, has been reported. That is a lot to me. So Batman, at this point, is in full-time Bat mode, I think we can say.
Gordon says it's clear he possessed extraordinary physical skill, and Flash, who Gordon beat up in the last part, if you remember, over 2 months ago in the chronology, says Batman is not a he, but an it. He is not human. I thought you said he was an it. Anyway. And again, how can anybody look at Batman and think, yeah, that's not a human? Even if it was night, you could tell it's a guy in fancy dress costume. It's not like he's that big looking either. Not like he's the size of Hulk or something, or 9 foot tall. But one thing he keeps consistent, like a bat, is that he works between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. So, there you are. If you ever wanted to know Batman's schedule, it's very clear for you. I wonder if this changes in the winter, after all. But Gordon also tells us he's working his way up from street-level crime to the bigger guys as well, as to any corrupt cops along the way. I'm not sure exactly how he sorts these guys out, since no cop seems to get punished in Gotham, but moving on. Flash recounts a story how he received a tip to a cocaine delivery and was about to single-handedly apprehend the criminals when Batman showed up and sorted them all out. Of course, I think the part about the tip was made up, as well as the part about him being about to apprehend the villains, because we know Flash is very naughty cop indeed, and he's just trying to cover up his crimes. I'm not sure how Batman's cape works in this. It seems pretty rigid in the silhouette as he jumps off the building, and yet later on he has to use this mechanical contraption in order to fly, unless it's because later on he is more like sailing, gliding across the sky, whereas here I suppose he's just flying down. But according to the story, his wings were 30 feet across. Now that seems very unlikely to me. This is what 30 feet wings looks like, but it's very possible Flash is exaggerating the story because he calls Batman the creature. Also says he was shot at point blank range and the bullet passed straight through the creature like it wasn't there. I mean, he's just a silly guy in a costume, so either they have very bad aim, or Flash is a bit blind, or a bit mental. I think most people in Gotham probably are a bit mental, or Flash was snorting some of that cocaine he was smuggling, and it messed with his head considerably. Flash says that Batman started laughing. Now, this isn't the idea of Batman that I have. He's a serious fellow. He's doing what he does because he wants to clean up the streets of Gotham. He wants justice in the city that is full of corruption and crime. His parents were victims when he was just a boy. He is not doing this for the thrill of it, because it's pleasurable, because he's psychotic and just loves the power. So, even in this very comic, he says that he wished he didn't have to do it, what he is doing. And in the Killing Joke comic, very iconic to you, I thought that's why Batman laughing was so significant, because it's so out of character for him. So I really don't like the fact that he is laughing. Unless, of course, we put it down to Flash and his imagination, or purposeful exaggeration, perhaps to gain sympathy from his fellow officers. I think that's going to be my explanation for it, and it does make some sense, to be fair. Also, he described something flying from the creature's hand, which were these little batarangs, and Flash remembers Batman having claws. Now, first of all, don't they have any of these batarangs left at the scene of the crime, so to speak? Don't they have any of these that they taken as evidence? Does Batman just go around in a mad rush after he's caught these felons and look for all his batarangs that he's threw at people? Does he not leave the scene unless he's found all of them or something? Because he knows that he doesn't want the police to have it. What exactly is the procedure here? How do they not have any of these batarangs left at the scene that they could examine? Very odd behavior to me. And also, do bats actually have claws? In the art we can clearly see he does not have claws. He has what just looks like gloved hands, and that's the way it is in all the movies also. So it is interesting that, to my knowledge, they have never designed him to actually have claws in the comics or in the movies, like we've seen in the past with Catwoman's design. She usually always has claws. Maybe they think it looks too feminine or something, but I think it would be cool to see a Batman design where he does have claws in the future. By the way, Flash is pretty much being mocked throughout this story. Officers chuckling and being sarcastic. And clearly Flash isn't the same confident person with the same reputation he had when Gordon first met him. 4 days later, May the 19th, Batman is sneaking around the mayor's mansion, and he overhears what these powerful people are saying. Commissioner Loeb gets a phone call from Gordon, who is concerned about the Batman, but it seems Loeb isn't actually bothered by the vigilante, says he is having a positive effect on public spirit due to the drop in street crime. And this guy says, we're trusting the commissioner to cope with Batman and Gordon. Now this guy is Carmine Falcone, the crime lord who controlled Gotham's underworld in the Batman Begins movie. And this was his first appearance ever, I believe, so you can see the influence there on that film. And he was also quite a significant character in the cable series Gotham. Commissioner Loeb was also in the first series of that show also. But Falcone expresses his concern that Batman is costing them money. But the commissioner insists that it's only a few street criminals that are affected. And this makes the citizens of Gotham feel that they have a hero and will feel safe and therefore ask less questions about these higher up criminals. Then Falcone mentions that Harvey Dent is trying to go after Detective Flash, who would be difficult to replace. And should he talk, should he spill the beans? So this Flash is clearly in the pocket of this crime lord Falcone and knows lots of valuable information about his criminal activities in Gotham. But then Batman throws a smoke grenade into the room and takes off the lights and blows up the wall, and we get this awesome image of him introducing himself to them with a threat that the feast of which they've eaten Gotham's wealth is nearly over, and that none of them are safe. No criminal is safe from the Batman. But he would surely need still the proper authorities to deal with things and the law. Otherwise, he'll just rough them up a bit, and that would be it. They could still continue their activities and not be punished unless he had extra help, you would think. So not sure what his plan exactly was to bring these people down. In fact, at this point, surely it is better to just leave them be for now. I mean, Loeb was quite content with just letting Batman be to deal with the street crime, and now he just went in there with a bang and rattled all their cages. Was it a wise decision, I wonder? Very unappreciative to me. May the 20th, the next day, and Loeb has had a very drastic change of heart indeed, telling Gordon he has to get the Batman or it's Gordon's job on the line. June the 2nd isn't really related to anything, to be honest. It's just 6 panels of a girl walking down a dangerous street alone at night, and she gets chased, and Batman is just observing that there are many police officers waiting and hiding, and he notes that Gordon is wasting a lot of manpower on these traps to catch criminals in the act. So that was all a setup, but it doesn't lead anywhere, and it's not very relevant to me. June the 5th, Falcone is tied up on his bed, and Batman apparently took his Rolls Royce and threw it in the river. I'm assuming they meant that he drove the Rolls Royce and drove it into the river and didn't just lift it up like the Hulk. But at the same time, would it really be surprising? He's clearly superhuman for sure, so maybe he could do it. But Falcone is clearly very angry about this, calling him Robin Hood, which is very English character to me, and declaring that he has to die for his crimes. I would like to see Batman drive a Rolls Royce, of course, though. He probably has a few in his own collection. June the 6th, Gordon is in Harvey Dent's office. This building actually reminds me of the Schumacher movies, with giant statues all around the Gotham, and this great architecture, cartoony to you. Anyway, Gordon basically suspects that Harvey Dent is Batman, arguing that he's been after Falcone for years. He's even come close to indicting him once or twice. But his witnesses would always change their testimonies or go missing. So Gordon mentions that he's used his muscle to keep you an assistant district attorney. To be honest, I wasn't sure whether he was referring to Falcone's muscle, meaning his influence, to keep Dent as only an assistant DA and not allowing him to progress. Or whether he meant Batman had used his muscle to keep Dent a DA somehow. Maybe by intimidating opposition or thugs or something. But he notices Dent has a barbell and says he must keep in shape, and then proceeds to ask him where he was in the following dates. So very suspicious behavior to him. But it is the twist. When Gordon leaves, unbelievably, it is revealed that Batman was just hiding behind the desk with Harvey comically calling, "You can come out now!" I mean, why was he there? I don't believe it was ever actually explained why he was hiding underneath Harvey Dent's desk. We'd never seen them meet before or have contact with one another, and I'm pretty sure we never see them in contact again, unless my memory is very failing for you. So it just seemed pretty random to me and very bizarre. And it's a bit of a coincidence that Gordon was there at the exact time Batman was. Didn't Batman have time to jump out the window or something before he came in? So now we knew that whenever somebody is talking to Batman, usually Gordon, and he suddenly disappears, we know that he's probably just hiding behind somebody's desk. I mean, look at that. In fact, he's not even under it, he's just next to it. I'm surprised Gordon didn't see his pointy ears poking out. How embarrassing for you. So, turns out Dent has one alibi for every date, which sounds kinda suspicious to Gordon. And between the hours of midnight to 4, only his wife is an alibi. So he does think it's possibly Harvey Dent as the Batman. Except he says it'll take more than muscle to fight the way Batman does, or to get around the way he does, and he has an arsenal of weapons which Dent apparently wouldn't be able to afford. Now, that does make me wonder how much lawyers or DAs get paid. You'd think they get paid a lot of money, especially in Gotham. They're never out of work, you would think, but apparently he wouldn't be able to afford. What is this total nonsense to me? What weapons is he on about? He's hardly Iron Man, is he? The only weapons we've seen Batman use is those tiny little batarang bits, and that is all. You could probably make those at home from any old scrap metal lying around, and I'm sure Dent can afford some Poundland trick-or-treat costume. These guys clearly have an exaggerated view of Batman. Very dramatic to me. Oh yeah, get this. Gordon's work partner, Detective SN. Because Gordon mentioned how you need to be filthy rich to buy a pair of tights and a few spikes in Gotham, she immediately mentions Bruce Wayne as a potential suspect. Out of nowhere! She says because he's the richest man in Gotham, and his parents were murdered by a mugger when he was a little boy. And clearly Gordon looks very pleased with this assessment. I mean, that is all it took to suspect Bruce Wayne. Bruce has barely been Batman for 2 months, and he's already the prime suspect. They've already figured out the whole mystery, this random Essen woman, when they had no previous suspicion of him prior. I mean, it's a miracle he lasted all those years as Batman. What about all those evil mastermind geniuses all trying to figure out his identity and never could? He's practically only just put on the mask and they've worked out who he is. So I found this very odd. Probably, in fact, very disappointing, I would say. The mystery and fun of Batman is sucked out when he's been suspected so easily, just by common knowledge, information that everyone in Gotham could be aware of. Makes it very difficult to believe, therefore, that Batman could have any sort of lasting legacy in this business, any long-term career. Besides, he can't be the only rich guy in Gotham to have a grudge against criminals. I mean, they should rename the place Crime City. There's so much of it, and the wealthy are surely going to be targets. I just think it's very baffling to have them figure out who he is in his origin story, and so easily also. And I never had the impression that Gordon had any idea that Bruce was the Batman, that it was even suggested to him by anybody, so it does change the way you see their relationship in future. Anyway, something that happens in the scene is Essen passes Gordon her cigarette, and when Essen makes this ingenious theory, Gordon says that he could kiss you, Essen, and he thinks to himself, he can already taste her lipstick in the cigarette. So, some foreshadowing going on there. Naughty thoughts for you, Gordon. Oh yeah, and also she's getting a little scratchy with his knee. But then a truck zooms by through a red light out of control. And there's a woman in the truck's path, and it looks like she's going to get run over. But then out of nowhere comes the Batman. Now I'm sorry, but this bony dude looks nothing like this thumb right here. No way. Anyway, Gordon is jumping from his car to the truck to try and get it under control. And the Batman is swinging on the lamppost for some reason. And then he dives and grabs the woman out of the way. But then more police come and chase Batman, even opening fire at him. He gets shot in the leg, even. I told you they were tight, didn't I? He gets trapped in an alleyway with apparently no way out. Clearly he hasn't got his iconic grapple gun yet, even though Gordon claims he has all these weapons that only a billionaire could afford. I guess a grapple gun was just too far out the budget. He escapes into a building and intends to make it to the roof. But Gordon gets a call from the commissioner, and despite Gordon's pleas, that Brandon dude is brought on the scene with his kill squad, and they basically blow up the building with Batman inside. And that is the end of chapter 2. But we see, of course, Batman is not dead or anything. From this last page, we see him in the shadows, watching the squad, searching for him through the rubble. Very dangerous for him. It is pretty crazy, I must say, that the police, at such short notice, can just get these high explosives and drop them on a building. Apparently it was due for demolition. First of all, that is very convenient to me. Secondly, they didn't even check to see if anyone else was inside the building, any civilians. Thirdly, it is way disproportional. I mean, they've already got officers on his tail, or his wings you could say. He's already wounded, he's only one man. It's not like they've been in this situation before with Batman, so they don't know how capable he is against an actual police force. And besides, they could have just sent in the Brandon SWAT team. That in itself would have been overkill at this stage. What was the need of blowing up the whole building? I suspect it has something to do with Falcone saying Batman's dead after he got tied up. And I think the commissioner is in Falcone's pocket. But still it's very crazy that they could freely do something like this. What happened to the commissioner's reputation? I guess he's not so concerned about that anymore. But this is a more of a cliffhanger ending than part 1. Will he be discovered? Will he be arrested? Will he be killed? This could be very extraordinary for you. Come along to part 3 to find out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Share your thoughts. Show me your support. Show me your crimes. And remember, chomp on that subscribe button if you would like to eat the cheese. Farewell, my moonshins. Take care, my moonshins. Ah, ah, ah.
Thank you.